What's up guys, it's me Jeremy. Champion concepts are perhaps one of the most mysterious and honestly to me just interesting things about League of Legends. And there's one particularly cool champion concept that sticks out to me as being especially interesting, which is a character that goes by the name of Tempus. He's quite an old concept and has been forgotten throughout the years, so join me today in trying to figure out what the hell happened to Tempus. And if you guys enjoyed the video, definitely hit that like button, and if you don't, do hit that dislike. Because if this video gets, let's say 5 ratings, I'm gonna make another video. Anyway, Tempus's original name was actually Aeon, named after the game Aeon of Strife, or perhaps Andrew Brownwell aka Riot Aeon, but his name was changed to Tempus because of what I imagine was maybe legal reasons conflicting with the game, or maybe just because they wanted to change his name or something, and honestly Tempus is kind of a cooler name anyway. And Tempus is a character that was mentioned here and there quite a bit by Riot Ezreal on the official League of Legends forums a while back, and he brought up bits and pieces here and there in 2010, as well as in 2011 and in 2012. Throughout Riot Ezreal's posts, he refers to both Tempus and Aeon kind of hand in hand, and in this video I'm just gonna stick to using the name Tempus just to stay consistent, but just know that in any case of some Rioter talking about Aeon, does mean that they were also talking about the character Tempus because, well, they're just the same character. So Tempus was described by Riot Ezreal to be a male, time-themed DPS physical damage assassin that he personally was extremely excited to create at the time. He was said to be able to deal a ton of damage, but also be incredibly squishy, being described as a melee physical cross between Ezreal and Kassadin, who was squishy but capable of awesome things. And around 2012, it was announced that Tempus had been officially put on an indefinite hold. Riot Ezreal had mentioned that the reason why Tempus had been put on hold was because, and I quote here, "I put a fairly risky kit on him and had to split my attention before testing, so he is currently not being worked on." And by a risky kit, what he means really is just a kit that has a bunch of crazy stuff in it to where it has a lot of potential to just not actually be possible to actually put into the game for one reason or another. Maybe it's a coding reason, maybe it's balance issues, stuff like that. And from there, Tempus was essentially put on permanent hold, and a few months later announced that he was on permanent hiatus and essentially kind of just cancelled, and we haven't heard anything about him ever since actually. But we do know a bit about his actual gameplay kit. Some of the abilities Tempus had, or I guess some of the abilities that were tested on him, involved a couple of different things. I'm not entirely sure which ability was on which button, but one of his abilities was somewhat of a fast forward time kind of themed ability that gave him attack speed with a sort of a stacking debuff that gave him sustained damage over time, since he was physical damage based of course, so the attack speed would give him a lot of DPS. And this would have given some nice damage, but then after a while he does get hit with significant debuffs, so it could have maybe created some interesting scenarios of setting up windows of opportunity. Another ability Tempus had was a line-based nuke that also teleported him the distance of the ability. Riot Ezreal described this ability as just a really awesome blink, and knowing Ezreal's typical design patterns in the past, he's a designer who just likes to put blinks on people, so this was probably a very fast and fluid ability that also gave true movement rather than just targeting an enemy, and would give Tempus that fairly assassin-based playstyle of having a bunch of mobility. He also had an interesting ability that was a damaging nuke where the damage effect would get cancelled and the health refunded if the target wasn't killed within a certain number of seconds. And this could actually be a really cool ability, but it does create a lot of binary gameplay situations and is at risk of being very unrewarding to play with or very unhealthy, since you're kind of left feeling as if you were just useless if you didn't actually kill the target with this ability and they ended up surviving long enough to get that health back. There was also, I think, a variation of this ability that would cause the damage to, instead of be refunded instantly, to fade off over time, and it was said that version was actually said to be an ability that did pretty well. This type of interaction would certainly be very unique, but if you boil it down, it's kind of just like this huge damaging nuke that then also gives your opponent a heal over time effect. So this variation doesn't necessarily make as much sense as the previous one at least, but it does have a lot of interesting scenarios, I guess. And for his passive, he was going to have something that gave him stats as each minute passed throughout the game, similar to maybe Rod of the Ages. Potentially an interesting concept, but this passive has so much potential to just be broken as hell, or perhaps entirely useless based on the actual scaling of it. So overall, his kit does seem to be a little bit crazy, or I guess risky is the term that Riot Ezreal used, and I definitely agree with him. There's a lot of mechanics in this paper kit that just seem very scary, or perhaps controversial, I guess you could say, in the sense that they have so much potential to just be broken beyond belief, or super anti-fun and unhealthy, and honestly, it's really not that good of a kit. Anyway, as I'm sure many of you have figured out already by now, Tempus shares quite a lot of similarities to another melee time themed assassin that made it into the game 2 years later, which is of course Echo, especially in terms of thematics. They do have a few differences though, despite having nearly identical themes. Tempus's gameplay kit was of course a lot different, and Tempus was also physical damage based rather than magic damage based. But it does seem like Tempus's theme of just being a time-based assassin had a big influence on making Echo into the champion he is today. However, this is a little bit of a peculiar story actually, since there is no confirmation in any way whatsoever that Tempus influenced Echo's creation, at least as far as I know. In fact, it's actually quite likely that the two concepts are entirely separate, and that Riot Gypsy Lord just happened to make a time-themed assassin without ever even knowing about Tempus, since he never brought it up or said anything about Tempus when he talked about Echo's previous development, and he shared a lot of information and a lot of development stories of cancelled champions in the past, so it's not like he would actively choose not to share the information, because he has shown in the past that he's okay sharing that kind of information, but under one exception. So the one exception in this case where Riot Gypsy Lord would actively go out of his way to not say anything about Tempus in relation to Echo is if Tempus happened to actually still be in development right now. Maybe his character has evolved or changed into something else, in fact it almost certainly has, and maybe it's still being worked on, and in that case it's very likely that Gypsy Lord wouldn't have said anything about him when he was talking about Echo's development in his previous Q&As. So on paper, at first glance, thematically, it seems extremely obvious that Tempus was just straight up transformed into Echo. But looking at the details of what I know about Echo's development, I'm not entirely sure. And there's a good chance that Tempus is either still being worked on right now and has been revived, or just didn't actually contribute to Echo in any way whatsoever, and it just happened to be a coincidence that Echo and Tempus are both male time-themed assassins. There hasn't really been any information about Tempus since the info Riot Ezreal presented in 2012, so I can't say with 100% certainty what happened to him exactly, but it's interesting that there is just a little sliver of potential that Tempus might actually be released as a little bit of a different champion in the future. Anyway, what do you guys think about Tempus? Leave a comment and drop a like if you enjoyed the video, subscribe if you want, thanks for watching, and I'll see you guys next time.